Hey, I'm Ty Newton, back again with round 3 of my responses to early listener questions about my debut album, The Future Isn't What It Used to Be. If you have questions you would like me to answer, do not hesitate to send them my way. There is still plenty of time. You can send those in comments or in DMs, or you can actually just reply to my newsletter. Those emails come directly to me. And while we're at it, if you want to actually know when these come out and when anything else related to my music happens, the very best way to do that is to join my newsletter. We all know social media is not the most reliable way to get updates. If you're relying on social media, you're going to miss stuff. I only send emails when I have something new to share with you all. And one of my favorite things about it is that it is totally universal. You do not have to be into a certain social media platform. And of course, when you reply to me, those go directly to me, so it keeps it super personal. At the time of recording this video, there are 5 out of 10 songs already released. I plan to do 10 of these if all goes according to plan, 1 for each song on the record. But being the 3rd video in the series, this one is loosely focused on track 3, Happier Words. An interesting thing about Happier Words is that at one point it was going to have an extended bridge with a medley of some of my favorite sad songs that used to be a source of comfort, and it would make me feel happy to sing them or listen to them. But in the context of a happy relationship, the idea came literally to adapt their lyrics with happier words. And that is the underlying concept of the song. So this extended bridge was going to be a medley of some of these songs with adapted words all strung together. Of course, I have a terrible habit of creating songs that are way too long, and I think this is actually the shortest song on the record, thankfully, because I cut that bridge. And the song is just stronger without it. As much as I loved that idea, it was a little too literal, and it also really simplified the process of releasing the songs because there was no legal concern of clearing the rights. Although it was really fun to actually translate some of their keys from minor into major and some of their time signatures into the 3/4 of Happier Words as well. Okay, first question actually comes from 2 people, or at least I think you're both asking the same question. Mavis asked me, I like whatever the synth noise is in Happier Words. What is that? And Tal said, I really like the build-up at the beginning of Happier Words. I think these are both referring to the same thing. There actually isn't a synth, so let me explain what that is. If you're both referring to the quiet warbling ambience that swells in at the beginning and again in the quiet gaps throughout the song, that's actually not a synth, but a cello with the bow gliding over the strings while pinched at harmonic positions. I am not going to do a good job of explaining this here on a video without a cello in front of me. I could sort of try with guitar, but it would be much better to just go ahead and look up pinch harmonics. You'll find some really fantastic videos explaining what this is, the physics of it, and the sound quality of it. But technically, as I explained in my last video, all of those string instruments, the cellos, violins, and violas, are actually Swam solo strings. These are software instruments that are physically modeling those instruments. Check out my round 2 video in this series for more on that. Anyway, I love that sound too. I really hope it elevates the song a bit. I aim to have at least one special element, something unexpected in every song. And this is what I landed on for Happier Words. As I've mentioned in notes about the song, Happier Words is probably the most plainly romantic song that I've made. And I really needed it to have this spacious, dreamlike warmth about it. And so when I was exploring ways to achieve that, I landed on this, and I just found it to be this hauntingly beautiful, off-kilter background ambience, and I just had to use it. Anyway, hopefully I understood what you both were referring to. The only other thing I can think of is that maybe the synth sound would have been the bass guitar, which just has a really thick texture about it, which I realize could maybe also be mistaken for synth. If not, let me know, and I'll follow up. I really want to make sure I answer everyone's questions correctly. All right, next question is more of a big picture album question. This is also kind of a combo question between two people again. I can't really answer one without answering the other. And one of them comes from my own niece, which I just love that my niece is sending me questions about my music. Thank you so much for asking these questions, Aria. So first up, Aria asks, what gave you the inspiration to make this album? And then Michelle asked a little bit more of a specific question. I'll start with a page 6 sounding question. Who is this about? An amalgamation of people? Or is there something more abstract to it? Fair question. And I really appreciate this question because I very much make songs from my own experience, but I've also begun to loosely use the term auto-fiction because these songs are inspired by my experience, but they're not meant to be historical record. I'm very much comfortable with minor embellishments in service of telling the better story. I do have a couple unreleased songs that are combining multiple people into one character, but that's not what's going on here with these songs. So anyway, who is this about? What inspired me to make this album? This album came together because I realized I had enough songs inspired by a particular relationship, covering basically every phase. A lot of hope, love, joy, and then a lot of doubt, breaking up, pain, anger, grief, etc. And I realized it made a pretty comprehensive story. As I've mentioned elsewhere, I also have a ton of other songs, some completely finished, before I started really dedicating myself to this album. And it wasn't until I realized that I had this comprehensive set that was all telling this one story arc that I realized I should focus up on these songs. And that's part of why I'm releasing songs that are actually pretty old at this point. One exception to this inspiration would actually be the song Home, the first track, because that song really came from how I was feeling by myself. It works as an introduction because I imagine the speaker explaining those feelings to a person they've just met, and it really bookends the album with the way the speaker winds up in that same place again. In fact, jumping ahead, the very last line of the title track, "The future isn't what it used to be," pretty much says it with the line, "My home leaves with you when you go." So the first half of the album is really how that person and that connection, that relationship came to feel like home. And the second half is really how that all comes apart and how one finds oneself back in that place, looking for home in oneself. I was working on the song Home while I was still in that relationship. And if I had finished and released it during the relationship, I'm certain the song would have been more about simply finding home rather than being about it seemingly perpetually out of reach. I think this is the better version of the song though, and I'm glad I waited to release it. An important thing to add, because I know half of this album is very dark and sad, is don't worry, I'm not actually living any of this right now. It's been a very long time. And as I've mentioned before, these songs are old enough at the time of releasing them that it's sort of like I'm listening in to someone else's story at this point. My hope is that someone else will be able to find something to connect with in these songs that helps them process whatever it is that they're going through. As I've discussed, I think that is such a powerful and important aspect of the art of making songs and of listening to them. If there's anything in particular about these songs that you especially connect with, please let me know. I would love to hear about it. One more question from my niece. Thank you so much for these questions, Aria. I am wondering what made you think to call your album and songs what you did? This is a really fun question. I know a lot of song makers use prompts, like starting with a title and writing lyrics from that title. So far, I think I've always done the inverse. The song titles come from the lyrics. When I name an album or a song, I'm looking for what expresses the core message in an interesting, maybe surprising way. I don't want it to be too plain, and I also don't want to give away too much, so there's something left to discover in the lyrics. Sometimes it's really concise, as in as few words as possible to get across a meaning, but sometimes it's surprisingly long. The future isn't what it used to be, for instance, is a complete sentence, which I think is not the most common thing for a song title or an album title, of which this one is both. I also love when the exact title doesn't even appear in the lyrics. So the title is adding something that is not there in the lyrics. Like the phrase happier words is never sung verbatim in the song Happier Words. It's just tying up the message of the song neatly in a bow. At least I hope it's succeeding in doing that. Same goes for coal in hand, which, by the way, I know it sounds like coal in hand. I'm just embracing that at this point, but is a reference to a quote attributed to Buddha. I am sure I'm going to be covering that in a later video, so I'll save that one. Same with Lovelorn Lullaby and Reverie Morning. Those two are both really just literal descriptions of what's happening in the song. Lovelorn Lullaby isn't strictly a lullaby, but the speaker in the song is drifting off or in and out of sleep in a terribly heartbroken situation. And Reverie Morning is also, let's face it, a little bit of a shameless pun between mourning with a U, as in grief, and morning without a U, as in daybreak. I am hardly the first to abuse that particular pun, certainly in song lyrics. For the album title, I settled on The Future Isn't What It Used to Be again, because it so neatly summarizes the entire story in a complete sentence. And really, the song itself is kind of an overview of the story arc as well. And I love the surprising apparent contradiction. Talking about what the future used to be should be incoherent. And I hope that that gets the listener or reader thinking. So much of the album's lyrics touch on future and past, on hope and happiness and commitment, turning to grief for a future that's been lost. I hope this is a good answer to your question, Arya. Please let me know. I'm trying to resist breaking down each and every song title because that would make a very long answer. But if there were any specific titles that you hoped I would say a little bit more about, please let me know. You can absolutely send me a follow-up question. I love those. Okay, that's what I've got for this round. Thank you all so much for the fantastic questions as always. Please do send me more questions in comments, in DMs, in email replies, and let me know what you guys think of these so far. Is the format working? Is there anything that you'd like to see me do that I'm not already doing? I want to know that stuff. And please subscribe to my newsletter. It's the best way to stay in touch. Just occasional updates when I have something meaningful to share. But otherwise, thank you so much. Keep the questions coming, and I will catch you in the next one.